Hey there, and welcome back to another episode of A Cup of Joe. My name is Joe Escobedo, and today we have a very special guest on the show, Lindsay Isler.
Hello.
Hey, Lindsay. So Lindsay is currently the Senior Global Marketing Manager at Fox. So thank you so much for being on the show, Lindsay.
You're welcome. Happy to be here.
Now, Lindsay, we know you're very passionate about networking.
I am.
Maybe you could share how networking has positively impacted your career or others you know?
Yeah, the first thing that I want to say about networking is I like to reframe it into relationship building versus networking. I think building relationships is really important, and that's always been really important to me. So I've gained a lot from it just in terms of, internally building relationships in the office and also externally building relationships. I'll just give you one example that was really interesting. When I worked at Lionsgate, there was somebody who came over from Fox, and I was at the time leaving to go over to Fox. So we were kind of switching companies, but I didn't know him. And so when he came over, he found out that I was leaving to go to his department that he was coming from at Fox. And he offered to introduce me to a bunch of the people on the creative team. And so that was really valuable to me because I was coming into a new environment, and that way I was able to start building those relationships even before I got to Fox. So what I did was I called these people and I introduced myself, and I just let them know that I was starting in a couple of weeks and that I wanted to start off on the right foot and get to know them. So that was one way that those networking relationships really did help me.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of good points in which you touched on. I think the first is changing the mindset from networking to building longer term relationships and how you can go about adding value first. So I think that's a great story in terms of how you started building those relationships before you even entered the company, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, it was really helpful because in my role, I work cross-functionally. And so I knew that I would be working with them on marketing campaigns and things like that. And sometimes there's clashes between brand marketing and creative, and it's really important to just have what I call job empathy and to understand where they're coming from and what's on their plate and what their goals are. So it was very helpful in that way too.
Yeah, I think the key word here is job empathy. I think having empathy for others is possibly the most important trait when it comes to building relationships.
Yeah, definitely goes a long way.
Now, Lindsay, could you share a bit more in terms of how you go about adding value? You talked about introductions. You talked about, helping others with their resume. What are some other ways in which people can add value to their network?
There's a lot of ways. It could be as simple as paying attention and listening and trying to hear, besides what people do in their job, what are they passionate about? Do they like to go rock climbing on the weekend? Those are the types of things you can listen to and leverage later on if you see something that could catch their eye, if you see an article about rock climbing or, for example, Good Solo came out, and that's about rock climbing, freehand, which is crazy. And you could send that to them and just say, hey, I saw this and I thought of you. That's an example of slowly building up a rapport with somebody. And it could be as simple as that. And it could also be making an intro somewhere. If you see somebody's maybe looking at pivoting in their career and maybe they're in advertising, but they're interested in production. I've done that before where I've said, hey, I have a friend who is in production I'd love to connect you to. And then the key is that when you make those introductions, to make sure that you're portraying what the mutual benefit is. So I don't necessarily want to reach out to my friend in production and say, hey, can you give all your knowledge to this person? I want to figure out, hey, I think you guys would get along. You both have a background in something that's similar, and I think it'd be really great and mutually beneficial for you two to connect. So I think you can be really creative with it, and there's a lot of different ways, but I think it's about trying to find the opportunities and paying attention to what's going on. It could also be giving them kudos. If you see that there's an article about them, you can post the article and, give a shout out, or just let them know that you see them and that you're here to support them is also really important too.
Yeah, well, Lindsay, thank you. There's so many good tips in there. I think
Good.
a lot of people think of it from the professional perspective, But even the personal perspective, you talked about, if someone's interested in rock climbing or some other activity and you come across something that might be interesting to them. So adding a bit of the personal relationship to the mix. And also, the other key point you touched on was mutually beneficial relationships in terms of introductions. So make sure it is benefiting both parties, not just one. I think is really key when it comes to introductions.
Mm-hmm.
So the last question is around, there's a lot of introverts watching the show, myself included. So you're obviously not an introvert, but I'm sure you have friends that are. So what tips would you have for introverts who are looking to build relationships within their network?
That's a really good question. The first thing that I'd say there is, again, about building relationships, and the timing at which you do it is really important. I think for somebody who's introverted, you want to start with really small baby steps. One thing, for example, that I do if I'm adding somebody on LinkedIn, for example, if they accept my connection request, I'll just shoot them a quick note and I'll say something like, great to connect. I look forward to engaging and interacting with your posts. And that kind of plants a seed. So I think for introverts, it could be about planting little seeds and maybe using those tactics that are a little bit simpler, as I mentioned, with sending an article or something along those lines. For me, I've been at Fox for about a year, and part of me coming over, my mission was to start building relationships as much as I could in a place where I was on a high. Because a lot of times when people are on a low, and let's say they get laid off or they're just looking for a job change or something like that, then they start to go out and then they want to connect. Then it feels forced.
So that's a very good point. And I actually touched on that in my recent workshop about digging well before you're thirsty. So building those relationships before you actually even need them. Because when you're in a stage where, like I said, you're looking for a new job or new opportunities, you're in a different part of your life. So a lot of the times your motive is very much self-centered. Whereas if you are already, like I said, fully employed, then you're able to come at it from a different perspective. You're not actually looking for anything. You're looking to help others. So I think that is
you really are.
Really, really good points, Lindsay. Thank you so much for sharing.
You.
I learned a lot as well.
Good.
So how can people get in touch with you? How can they connect and build a relationship with you? What's the best way?
The best way right now is LinkedIn. I love when people send me notes. I can't accept everybody, and I get a lot of messages, but when I get those messages where I feel like it's very targeted to me and they say, like, I've read something you've written or something like that, then it gives me more of an incentive to want to connect back with them. So I've been very generous with my time in terms of mentoring and coffee, and I love doing that stuff. Like, I've always been a career coach, and people say that in my past life I was probably a recruiter because I love connecting people to each other and building those relationships. So that's right now, LinkedIn is the best way to get in touch with me. And I'm very active on LinkedIn. You'll see if you connect with me.
Yes, you are. Well, Lindsay, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate it. And to everyone watching, if you liked Lindsay's interview, be sure to like it, comment, and share. And be sure to subscribe too if you want more great interviews like this. So Lindsay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for the opportunity.
All right. See you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.